The Haunting Walk of Bryan, a tale of unease and terror. Is there a deeper terror lurking in the streets we walk every day? Late night strolls, familiar roads, and even the most mundane of tasks can become the setting for something far more sinister than we could ever imagine. In the haunting walk of Bryan, one man's quiet evening walk becomes a race for survival against something beyond the natural world. Bryan's workday stretched far into the evening, and when the clock struck 7:30 p.m., the office was eerily quiet. The usual buzz of conversation and ringing phones had long since faded, leaving behind a hollow silence. The tension was palpable, as if the room itself were holding its breath, waiting for something. As Bryan grabbed his coat and shut down his computer, he couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something wasn't quite right. It was as if the very air around him was thick with expectation. Stepping outside, the sharp autumn chill hit Bryan like a physical blow. The wind was biting, almost unnatural, leaving him shivering despite his jacket. But it wasn't just the cold that unsettled him, it was the oppressive silence of the city. There were no cars, no people, no noise, just the echo of his own footsteps on the pavement. Bryan quickened his pace, but something was following him, something he couldn't see but could feel. Every time he glanced over his shoulder, the street behind him remained empty, yet the feeling of being watched didn't let up. It started as a faint rustling, like dry leaves scraping across the ground. Bryan stopped, straining to listen, but there was no wind. The trees didn't move. It was as if something, someone, was mimicking his every movement. Then came the whisper, soft, low, barely audible. Bryan! A shiver ran down his spine. His breath caught in his throat as his heart began to race. How could anyone know his name? He was alone on an empty street, surrounded by darkness. But as he turned sharply to look into the shadows, he saw nothing. The whisper came again, louder this time, and that's when Bryan knew something was terribly wrong. With his pulse pounding in his ears, Bryan hurried towards the alley that led to his apartment. But as he approached, he saw it, a figure standing motionless at the far end, under the dim glow of a flickering light. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and dressed in a long, tattered black coat. Its face was hidden, swallowed by the darkness. Bryan's feet froze to the pavement. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body wouldn't obey. Every instinct told him to get away, but he was paralyzed, trapped by the suffocating presence of the figure. Then the figure moved slowly, deliberately. Every step it took echoed in the silent night, growing louder and closer with every passing moment. Bryan snapped into motion, his legs pumping as he ran, but the figure never stopped. It followed. It was hunting him. The alley, which should have led to safety, felt like a labyrinth, closing in on him. The walls seemed to bend inward, the shadows twisting around him, reaching for his skin. The figure was relentless, its steps growing louder, faster as it closed the distance between them. Every time Bryan dared to look over his shoulder, it was still there, always a breath away. Its cold fingers were inching closer, and he could feel its presence pressing down on him like a physical weight. His apartment building was in sight. Just a few more steps. He was so close, but the shadows were too fast. They wrapped around him, putting him back in darkness. Desperation surged through Bryan. His hands fumbled for his keys, but his fingers were shaking too badly. Panic was rising in his chest like a tidal wave. Then, just as his fingers brushed the keys, the cold grip of the figure's hand closed around his throat. The air was sucked from his lungs, and for a moment everything went black. Bryan could barely breathe. The darkness closed in around him, suffocating him, and the figure's grip tightened, drawing the last breath from his body. A voice, soft and cruel, whispered in the ear, "You shouldn't have looked back. You shouldn't have stopped running." For what felt like an eternity, Bryan's vision swam and his body grew heavier, his limbs numb. He thought it was the end. He was sure of it. But then, suddenly everything stopped. The grip released, the rustling ceased, the chilling wind died down. Bryan gasped for air, his heart pounding in his chest. His eyes darted out the alley. It was empty, no figure, no shadows. But Bryan wasn't alone. A faint laugh echoed from the darkness. It wasn't a human laugh. It was low and inhuman, dripping with malice. "You can't escape me." The shadows around him stirred. The rustling began again. Closer, louder. Bryan's blood ran cold. He realized with a sickening certainty that it was not over. The figure would come again and again. It always did. 6 months later, Bryan was having his dinner at a mental asylum somewhere near Chicago. And someone invisible was inside the room with him. When the food delivery man, Jack, came to clean his table, Bryan pleaded with him not to come inside. Jack just grinned and entered the cell. Bryan went up to Jack, twisted his neck, and gave out a sinister laugh. No, it wasn't Bryan who killed Jack.